Rather than hitting a glass, we've just heard recording in progress. So I think it's time to start. So first of all, an enormous welcome to the guests from New Mills and Marple and District. Rotary Club, thank you for coming along and joining us. And all being well, next year, we'll come and visit you for lunch. That would be lovely.
If you're invited.
If we're invited. I hope then the rest of today goes well, so that we can be. Welcome to President Mike and everybody else who's come along from your club. Also to Tony, who's an associate member. I hope you enjoy, I hope you mix and talk with people, exchange ideas, and enjoy the afternoon. Also welcome to Des, who is our speaker, and he will be speaking very soon. We have some online guests. We have some interesting guests online. Yeah. We have Bill Laidlaw, who's our foundation chair. A very fine man who unfortunately is just a little picture on the screen that none of you can see. We have Sunny Adidokan. You said that I wouldn't be able to pronounce. Okay, sorry, Sunny, if I mispronounce your name. Sunny is a visiting Rotarian from Nigeria who may get involved in an Interact project that the club is getting involved in to make films about older people. Joan Johnston, welcome out of hospital. Wish you better. Speedy recovery, and thank you for joining us. And Dale was a member until she got the opportunity to move to Nice. And for some reason, she decided to take that opportunity. So welcome, Dale, as well. Dale recently did the Cross India bike ride on a motorcycle to raise money for foundation. Let's start with the loyal toast. So for those who wish to stand and are able to stand, please do so. But if you're not, then the toast is the King, Duke of Lancaster.
King, Duke of Lancaster.
Some of you may have heard as Sarah came in, there is a birthday today. It's Helen's birthday. So welcome and happy birthday.
Thank you.
We will sing happy birthday either now or later, whichever you like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so our speaker today is Des Lynch from the Wood Street Mission, an organization that we have been involved with for many years. So over to you, Des.
Cheers. Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for asking me. I wouldn't call too soon, you're not hearing me yet. I'm the CEO of Wood Street Mission. And for those that don't know, I'll give you a little bit of history of Wood Street because it's quite detailed. And then it brings it into the future and the present, because the present and the future are linked very much with our history. And I'll explain why in a little moment. So Wood Street Mission is a children's charity, and for anybody that doesn't know, if you come out the back way of this building, down the tight little street where the magistrates' courts are, we're there on the left-hand side. And Wood Street was set up in 1869, so we're one of the oldest charities anywhere in the region, 154 years old, and it was set up by a guy called Alfred Alsop. And Alsop was a self-made man. He was a bookseller by trade. He was also quite a prolific author. He wrote 14 or 15 books on the life and times of Manchester and Salford and the living conditions therein. He was a Methodist lay preacher and he had 7 children of his own. So I think it's fair to say he was a busy old boy. Okay? But then there were no TVs in Victoria and Manchester either, so bear that in mind. And the reason he set it up, he got together with some like-minded people, John Rylands being one of them. He was one of the original trustees of Wood Street, because he looked around the living conditions and how people existed really in Manchester and Salford and was appalled by it and decided to do something about it. He was a bit of a rebel, has to be said, because the authorities didn't particularly like him, and they didn't like him because the authorities at the time were trying to portray northern cities, and particularly Manchester and Salford, as these go-getting cities at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, which indeed they were. However, there was a price to be paid because people were literally dying on the job. And he wants to highlight that and the poor living conditions that people had to exist in. So if you look at this area itself, where all the smart shops are now in Spinningfields, and we've got the hotels left, right, centre, Victoria, Manchester is very different. It was full of 2 up, 2 down, back-to-back dwellings, no sanitary facilities whatsoever. All the houses were interspersed with what they called rookeries, which were basically alleyways. But if you took the wrong turning down the wrong alleyway at the wrong time, you weren't coming out in one piece, quite frankly. That's how rough it was. It had some of the highest violent crime rates of anywhere in the country. And around about that time, there was all kinds of these slum areas. Has anybody heard of Angel Meadow?
Yeah.
Angel Meadow, for those that don't know, is where behind Victoria Station, and it was predominantly where the Irish immigrants first landed, and they existed. They didn't live there, they existed. They existed underground, 14 to a room. And when Engels met Marx here, they visited that area and they later wrote about it. And Engels said he called it hell on earth. And the Deansgate area was no different from that. So I also took a look at the area and decided to do something about it. So they set up a charity and they had a place on Lombard Street, first of all, which doesn't exist now. That's where Manchester Central is. And they were there for about 4 or 5 years. And then the railways started to expand. Because the railways are expanding, they want to build a station on that site. With that, they slum cleared the area. So they decided then to purpose build their own building. And the building that we're in now is that very building. So we operate out of a building that they built or went into that building around about 1875. So if anybody wants to come around and have a look at any time at the building, by all means, you can see exactly what we do and how we do it. But from a historical point of view, it's worth having a look around. Where we are, we're quite fortunate as we're sat in the office, that was the chapel. So you can see the beams and everything else in the stained glass windows. So it's a bit of a strange thing to have here now in Manchester, in this location. We'll explain why in a moment, why it's still here. So he did an awful lot of work outside, made a few enemies along the way, set the charity up by the age of 20, at the age of 24, and was unfortunately dead by the age of 47. There's no plaques to him. There's no statues to him anywhere in Manchester, Salford, anything like that. But the records show that when he died, his cortege was taken through the streets of Manchester and thousands turned out to pay their respects. So I think that was probably better than any plaque or any statue could ever say, really, as to how many people he'd actually touched and helped throughout his career at Wood Street. Just to say, I look out now and it's spring day, bright sunshine out there, and okay, a little bit of rain, but it's beautiful out there, isn't it? If this was Victorian Manchester and we were sat here, you wouldn't have been able to see the sky because the smoke and the chemicals that were belching out of the factories made that impossible. The noise of the horse and carts going about the business, the engines and machinery from the factories just made it one constant living hell. And that's why I decided to do something about it. So Wood Street, the building itself was used for all manner of things over the years. It's been a night shelter. So 300 or 400 people a night would sleep on the benches and the floors. It's been an air raid shelter during the war. So GIs stayed there as well in transit going to Warrington before they went over to France. It's a remarkable history of the building. All manner of things has happened there. We used to have a trustee who was a member of the trustee board of trustees who remembers sleeping there as a child because she was brought up in a pub further down Chester Road, just into Hume there, and that was her local point. So when the air raid sirens were sounded, off she hot-footed it up to Wood Street and slept in the basement. So it's quite remarkable. Wood Street's always had the ability to look at itself and decide, okay, what can we do next? How can we make a difference? And I like to think that today we still do that. To give you an example of that, by the early 1900s, they decided somebody had a great idea to take some children away to Southport, okay, to get some fresh air into them, see the sea, though I'm not sure Southport is the best place to go to see the sea. But however, they did. And they put an advert in the paper as you do, and hundreds of kids turned up in Albert Square, and they took them down to Manchester Central, and off they went to Southport for the day. So many kids turned up that they repeated the exercise the following week. It must have been mad. It was just unbelievable. You can take hundreds of kids away. So with that, they discovered that when those children came back, they were reinvigorated. They had colour in their cheeks, they'd been fed well for the day, they'd had fresh air. So they decided then to embark on buying a piece of land and building their own campsite. And they found a piece of land just outside St Anne's in Blackpool, and they built their own campsite there. So from the early 1900s till 1963, they took thousands upon thousands of children away for the weeks to just give them a different environment. That's some undertaking in itself, but they met a need then. That was the point of it. Can you imagine taking hundreds of kids away today? Do you imagine how many high-vis jackets you needed in junior sizes before you did anything else? So that's not on our agenda today, but something else is on similar lines. And that's where we learn from the past and we bring it into the present and the future. So by the mid-1980s, late 1960s, sorry, it was always part of the Methodist Church. So there was a chapel there. But by the late 1960s, the natural congregation that was around this area had dispersed because this had become a sun clearance area. So people were moved out to places like Little Hulton in Salford, Eccles, Langley for North Manchester, Wythenshawe, that kind of thing. And they brought on board a former police officer called Arnold Yates, who was a detective chief and superintendent. And if you go into the police museum, there's a piece about him in the police museum there. Quite a strong man, headstrong man, but was devoted to young children, to young people, and stopping them going into crime. So he looked at Wood Street Mission and decided, right, the chapel really has had its time, the natural congregation has gone and dispersed. So that's when Wood Street Mission then separated from the Methodist movement, and he's no longer part of it, he's no longer part of any religious movement. But he looked and he decided to modernise Wood Street. So he decided that what he was going to do in the late 1960s is focus on teenage children. So we had live bands in there on a Friday night, believe it or not. Youth clubs galore with badminton courts, football pitch downstairs, you name it, he'd done it, okay? But what was good, one which, I only found this a few years ago. Again, this is something which I think Wood Street doesn't make enough of as how positive it is in its way it's thinking and way it looks at things and what it needs to do. And it had an advice service. This was one of the first advice services in the country dealing for and only with teenagers and their problems and issues. That was quite groundbreaking in the late 1960s. It really was. So what do we do today to link with the past? Okay. So today we do 5 major projects. Okay. We're still based at Wood Street. We do outreach work as well, but our base is Wood Street Mission. So the 5 projects we do all aim to alleviate the effects of child poverty. In the 2 cities of Manchester and Salford, there is an estimated last year, there are new figures out just this morning, but last year, the combined total, and it is an estimate, of children deemed to be living in poverty in Manchester and Salford is just over 63,000. Okay? So it's nearly the capacity of Old Trafford. It's bigger than the Etihad, but they don't need a big round, do they? Because they don't fill it. Just saying. Just thought I'd get that in there. I knew she would like that. So if you look at it, 63,000 children. Okay. And just going back to the history again, where the local authorities wanted to portray Manchester and Salford as these successful cities, which they were, but there was a price to pay. And in a similar link to that, really, if you look at the vitality of Manchester city centre in particular, one of the smallest city centres anywhere, 3 square miles, Salford is now mirroring that with some of the work they're doing. The development is massive. When I was growing up in the 1980s, you could count the number of hotels on one hand. Now there's that on every street. Bars galore, restaurants galore, and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic environment, far better than I was growing up. However, 20 minutes, you can walk in any direction out of this city centre and you're in some of the worst poverty-stricken areas anywhere in the region. So in some ways, history does mirror what's happening today, because it's not featuring out, it's not going out, seeping out to those that need it. I'll tell you that, I'll be honest with you, my mum lives in a council estate. Okay, I was brought up in a council estate. On that council estate, those houses are full of mould. So what you're listening to in Rochdale with children dying is still happening in Manchester and Salford while we're surrounded by what we're surrounded in. So we have to ask questions as to why that's not seeping out. However, that's a bigger question. So we just need to deal with the reality of everyday living of children in Manchester and Salford. So we have a brochure here. Please feel free at the end of it, if you want to pick up a brochure, all the details of our projects are in there, and a little bit of the history, help yourselves to that. If anybody wants to come round and have a look, you're more than welcome to do so. So, Family Basics, that's the major project. That does what it says on the tin, really. It provides basic items for families in need. By the way, all the families that come to us have to be referred. They can't just come in at the door. They have to be referred by workers, support workers that are working with them. So that can be a myriad of professions, everything from mental health teams, health visitors, children's services, you name it. So once they're on our books, they can come back to Family Basics 3 times in a year, okay? And they can stay on our books for all our projects for 12 months. If they need help after that 12 months, they have to get re-referred again. So it's only an ongoing process if the workers deem it needs to be, because we're trying to break that cycle of poverty, really. So many families I see come back year after year, and it goes through generations. Others don't, they get themselves out of it. But I've been involved with Wood Street for 32 years now, and I can see generations of families coming back that we never break that cycle. So Family Basics isn't going to change anything, to be honest. It's not there to break the cycle of poverty. It's there to just alleviate the day-to-day effects. So it provides everything from children's clothing, toiletries, toys, bedding, that kind of thing, real basic items. The other project that we do, again, which isn't particularly groundbreaking because it's not going to change anything, is the Christmas project, which I know you guys have always supported for many, many years. Now, the Christmas project started off and was ran throughout Wood Street's history by every child getting a toy and a bag of nuts. Things have changed a little bit now. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Tell me in December when I'm tearing my hair out and I'll tell you. Last year we distributed over 12,500 toys and gifts. And what we do is the families come in, or a representative of the family comes in, and the shop area there, we call it a shop. Nothing is sold by Wood Street, everything is given out. The Family Basics area, which is done out like a shop, which would normally have clothing in, and toys and toiletries, that kind of thing, is turned over to a Christmas shop. Every toy, every gift is new, and a representative comes in from the family. We introduce them to a personal shopper who is either a member of staff or a volunteer, and they accompany that person all the way around, and they help them choose their toys. So basically, the family member chooses the toys, because who knows their children better than anyone? It's the parents or the guardians, it's not us. So they go around, they usually choose between 3 and 5 toys, and they can have them out of different categories. So there's stickers on to make it simple. Red is a premium toy, yellow is a medium toy, and green is a small toy, and around they go. Then once they've been around, they get to choose wrapping paper, these selection boxes on the go and things like that, and off they go. It takes about 2.5 weeks to distribute 12,500 toys, 150 families a day, something like that. And we use 220 volunteers for that over the 2.5 weeks, which are usually volunteers from our corporate partners, companies that sponsor us or work with us throughout the year. And in return, they get then opportunity to volunteer with us. So it's quite an in-depth logistical nightmare, that, or challenge, as some would say. So others, it's a nightmare. But it is, well, it's great to see families going out, having chosen their own toys and giving them that confidence boost. But it's not going to change anything, that is purely, and I make no, apologies for this, this is purely so that children go back to school after the Christmas holiday and talk to their mates and say, I got this, I got that, and not have to stay quiet and keep out of it, because that's vitally important, because that's confidence building and feeling of belonging. That's vitally important. The other 3 projects are more proactive, I have to say. So we have Smart Start, which is our school uniform project. So the idea of that is the way to break the cycle of poverty is education. Simple as that. There are many other factors that come into play, but education is vitally important. In order to get kids through their education, they need to look like their peers and feel like their peers and have the confidence to then go into school, answer the questions and take a full part in education. But they need the uniforms to do that. That's the opening point. They need to look like each other. They need to have coats to go to school. Some kids go to school without a coat on and they're freezing cold, they're wet before they even get into a classroom. If you feel different and are different, you're less likely to stick your hand up and answer a question. You'll stick at the back of the class and hide because you don't want to be different. You're already different. You don't want to make a mistake in front of your peers. So we need to break that barrier down. So what we do, we take referrals from workers and we use a local company called David Luke. And David Luke are based in Hardwick. Been around about 40 odd years. And we have a great working relationship with them. And I believe we have a unique working relationship with them as a charity. Because what we do is we take the referrals in, we process the paperwork, send the order forms to David Luke, and they order pick from their warehouse. And then they home deliver to the families. So it's a courier van turning up just like any other courier van. There's no stigma to it. Nobody knows any different. What is also unique about this partnership is they actually fundraise for us whilst we're paying for the uniforms, which is a bit odd. But basically it works out that for £40, we can have a set of school uniform brand new. But as an added gain to this, if you like, the uniforms that they provide are made from recycled plastic bottles, believe it or not. So every child that gets a skirt, trousers from a jumper, they're going round in recycled plastic bottles. No other company does that. So you see, our relationship with them really is quite unique. Together with school uniform, we'll also provide accessories like stationery sets, rucksacks, coats. Again, as I say, we do another deal with a company called Trespass, who some of you may know make outdoor clothing. They're a Scots company then, but they have a really good charitable ethos. So we can purchase coats from them. Cost us around about £18, but they retail 45 to 60. You know, so it's a real, and those children then want to wear those coats because they feel part of it. They feel like their mates. Vitally important. That runs alongside our other project, which is Books Forever. We're passionate about getting kids to read. It fits in with the education, and it's about giving children access to books so they can read what they want. So tomorrow we're in a school in Whalley Range. So there'll be 4 members of staff going, including myself. And we'll set the school hall out like a book fair. The classes come in year group by year group, and they're given a book bag. And it just simply says bag a book on it. And in it will be a leaflet. And the children sit down and we explain the importance of reading from an education point of view, of where it can take you, any job you want, work in any country, set up your own business if you want, that's where it can lead to. It's also the importance of relaxation and not being stressed out and escapism. You know, if you're a little bit worried, you've got a little bit of a niggle, pick up a book, get lost in the book. That's vitally important as well. And it's allowing kids to have access to books. It's an incredible project. I'm quite proud of it. Most of the books that we give out are new, and that's our current appeal at the moment is for new books. We do second-hand as well, good quality second-hand. But the thing about this is, once we've taught them, the children then go off and they choose 5 books each, which they're usually astonished about, but it's their choice again. So one, we have to assure them, yes, the books are free, yes, the bags are free, and no, you don't have to bring them back. You take them home, you keep them forever. And they can't believe it. And it has such an impact. And you've never been into schools before, and teachers will tell you where the whole school is bouncing and talking about books. Even the teachers are shocked at it. But it's a simple project, this, to get children reading. And it also is to aim to get to the hard to reach families as well that maybe are reluctant to approach us for help. So in there's a leaflet, and we say to the children, there's a deal to be made. You get all this for free, and the only part of the deal that you have to adhere to is when you go home tonight, pick that leaflet out the bag, show it, whoever got you out of bed this morning, say, come on, you're late for school, get your coat on, come on, hurry up. Whoever said that to you, you give them that leaflet. They bring that leaflet back into school, and the school does the rest. They will make the referral in. It's trying to break those barriers down. The last one, then I will shut up, I promise you, is childhood experiences. And this does hark to the past. Remember I told you about the school holidays? Sorry, about the holidays that we took the children away to Blackpool, Squires Gate. Very similar to that. I don't go down the line of high-vis jackets, 20 and 30 at a time and all the rest of it, insurance forms. What we do is we work with children's centres or youth clubs, youth groups, that kind of thing. And for the first time in actually a few weeks, we're actually going to work with the school with this particular project as well. And we work with these groups that are in deprived areas, and we take these children out for the day somewhere to give them an experience that they wouldn't normally experience. Yes, it can be educational, but more about having fun with their peers and getting out of the normal situations that they're in. So we've had them to indoor climbing centres, skateboarding parks. Where else have we had them? We're going to Eureka just before Easter or just after Easter, taking them to Halifax there. We've had them at a place called Bewilderwood. Has anybody heard of Bewilderwood? It's right in the heart of deepest, darkest Cheshire, Tarpley. Lord Cholmondeley's estate, and there is a tree climbing place there called Bewilderwood, and it's an amazing place. If you've got grandkids or kids who you want to take them away for the day, go there, they'll have fun, and they'll come back and they'll sleep for hours because they'll be absolutely knackered, I tell you. And we took 4 groups there last year, and we've got another 4 groups going there this year. We've also got a group going to the Lowry Theatre in about 3 weeks' time, so they're going to experience a theatre workshop, have some lunch there, and then watch a production. Because again, that's not an environment that we would actually go to. We've had them at pantomimes, various theatre productions as well. It's just anything that we can think of to get children out of the normal environment. I have to say it's quite popular with the companies that support us because they like that idea. And it did start off with Wood Street paying for that and supporting that. I have to say we more or less facilitate it, and the companies pay for it these days, which is kind of them. Just on that note, you hear a lot about companies and things like that. And I see the best, and I'm mixing different worlds all the time. So sometimes I'm dealing with families, sometimes I'm dealing with donors, sometimes I'm dealing with companies. So I have a great job, I actually enjoy it. I get to do this. I get fed as well. I mean, what more do you want? You know, I have a great time doing my job. I love it. But a lot of companies out there, big companies, they don't get really sometimes the publicity or for what they actually do, because there's a lot of good companies out there that think, yeah, we're making this and we're doing it, but how can we make a difference? And that goes under the radar a little bit. So just to show you, there's an awful lot of really good companies out there. If you've got any questions, guys, either now or later, I'm around, well, definitely till the end of lunch because I'm not missing that. So if you've got any questions, please give me a shout. If you want a leaflet, a brochure, and indeed, if you want to come round to Wood Street at some time, just give me a shout. We can arrange that. Okay. Thanks for listening to it.
We have time for a couple of questions. Would anyone? Yes, Ernie.
I was particularly interested in your book project. What sort of books are the limits on what you will accept or?
It's like, well, if it's used books, basically it's any books from 0 to 16 years of age to teenagers, and they just have to be good quality, so they can't be ripped or they can't be written in and things like that, because we want kids to appreciate them.
Novels or
doesn't matter.
Fiction or...
Doesn't matter, because you go into a school, you'll get a range of children, and there may be some that only want fiction, but there will be not others that are fascinated by certain aspects of science or whatever it may be. So it's right across the range. There's no restrictions whatsoever. Absolutely no. And to be honest, I don't really care. Sometimes we've taken tomorrow, because it's a massive school tomorrow. Most schools that we deal with, primary schools, are around about the 250, 300 children mark. This is 650, this one tomorrow. So it's just, you know, it's massive. So we've had to take some comic books out. And some people frown on comic books. So they're brand new, absolutely brand new. But I don't care what children want to read. If they pick it up and that entices them to read, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all. If it leads to something else, brilliant. So that's where we're at. But anything. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll stand opposite the table now. Hear me, sorry. Yeah, you talked about boots and so forth. Yeah, obviously, I'm involved with World Literacy Day through Stockport, Lamplights Road, Manchester Breakfast. We give away about 2,500 books last Saturday.
Yes, I saw that, yeah, because we were retweeting your tweets and things like that.
Right, yeah. So maybe next year we can put you in touch in advance and you can pick the best. Why not?
Brilliant, yeah, anything that helps us,
So
yeah.
that will help. But the question is, obviously, Manchester, he talked about the angles. Manchester is built on immigration.
It is.
We've got people of Irish extraction myself, I'm an Ulsterman. We've got Italian, Jews, all sorts of races, ethnic culture that come to Manchester. In the current situation, history repeats itself, as you said, you know, do we actually learn from history sometimes more? But what's the current challenges you're facing? Because I'm involved with Afghan refugees. 18 months ago, they came to this country, invited by us, but not very well looked after by us. And I wore the Ukrainian flag for obvious reasons. Support Ukrainian center. So what are you finding now in the current immigration situation? Something that's positive as against what's been in the news recently about the negative side of asylum seekers and so forth. What challenges are you facing at Wood Street in that context?
I think the numbers, obviously, but the numbers have always, Manchester, as you quite rightly say, in this region, has been built on immigration. We wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't have a ship canal bringing the cotton in if it hadn't been for the Irish in particular. But I've always seen influx in my 30 odd years. There's always been influx of different ethnicities. You can go back to the early 1980s, and it was the Vietnamese boat people. You move on to maybe the 90s when I started at Wood Street, 2 or 3 years there, it was Somalis. So you've always had different influxes depending on what's happening around the world. So that never changes. I think what we've got a problem is a lot of these people, you rightly say, here, language is a big problem, obviously, and getting our points across because there's not enough interpreters and things like just a basic thing like that. There are not enough interpreters. So can you imagine trying to sit down with somebody and explain, right, we're going to give you a house. We won't be your house. You can only live there for 6 months or what have you. How do you even begin with that when you can't even talk the language? So that's the first thing. It's just a shortage of just forward thinking and planning. It's just basics, really. The housing situation is dire. We have to face facts that since Margaret Thatcher decided to sell off the council structure in this country, we have never then replenished the amount of social housing that we needed, right? Never. All governments in 40 odd years now. So we're playing catch up, but we're nowhere near it. So you've got an influx now, or a massive influence of private landlords, and some of the private landlords are very good, but an awful lot of them are very, very, very bad. Okay, particularly, and of course, that's where you then place immigrants because they're in the poorest housing. It's the cheapest option. So they're in North Manchester in great numbers, North Africans in particular over the last 10 years. And there are other areas as well. Salford now, interestingly, Little Hulton, we do an outreach project in Little Hulton, which is the furthest away in Salford you can get before you're into Bolton. So Little Hulton is like the land that time forgot. There's not a road sign to direct you to Little Hulton. That's how bad it is. There's not a blade of grass there. It's just concrete and bleakness day after day. And I don't say that lightly coming from where I come. I come from Harper. You know, that's like Beirut on a bad day. You want to see Little Hulton. But now we're adding to that problem because we're now putting immigrants into that mix as well. So you're mixing with people who haven't got anything anyway, and now you're adding another influence, you know, a mix. And you've got all this going on. There's no forward thinking, there's no planning, and certainly no funding for anything.
And regardless of all the politics, this is about children.
Absolutely.
It
And
all
what-
comes back to the children.
Absolutely right. And what I would say, because I say to everybody, you can criticise different governments, and yes, some exacerbate certain situations more than others. I can safely say that to you. But let's face facts here. Wood Street Mission has been around for 154 years. So we've had a myriad of governments in that time with all different political persuasions, and not one of them has ever come close to eradicating child poverty in this country. Not a one. I think that says it all unfortunately.
Des,
Yes.
63,000 children living in poverty is a horrible figure.
Yeah.
Do you,
I think that's an underestimate, by the way. But yeah.
do you try to find out why some of these families are in poverty?
It's a real mixture of reasons. Obviously, if you're an immigrant, then and you're seeking asylum, you're not allowed to work, so you can't get anything. You're just not allowed. So a lot of people want to work but can't. But then you've got other people here, and I come back to the education part. I think education is vital. So when I say that you see generations of families stuck in a poverty trap, you do see some and some not. Some get themselves out of that. But if you can educate children, right, to a certain level, they are bound to then want to get a better job, bigger earnings and things like that. But what you're doing is we're churning out children and just getting them through a system. So I come back to the size of the school that we're going to tomorrow. We've done one of these before this year, and we've done previous ones in previous years. If you've got a school of 650 children, that is very different than trying to teach a school of 250. The quality isn't there, right? The quality of teaching isn't there, not through any fault of the teachers, but because of the sheer numbers that they're dealing with and the lack of resources. But unless you pump money into children's services, as in schools, we had a great scheme called Sure Start. Sure Start centres were phenomenal. It's probably one of the best things Labour did when they were in power. Certainly the best idea Gordon Brown ever had. Fantastic. Because they were tackling issues when children were young and tackling with their parents. Change of government comes along and Sure Start centres just get annihilated because it was an easy hit. Well, it is an easy hit at that stage. So it looks great on paper because you're going to save X amount. But as a country, you pay for that years down the line, far more than you would ever have done if you'd have put the money into Sure Start centres and things like that. Because you pay for it because people's health suffers then, because diets are a problem, because you're not educating people properly. You've not got the funding for them, so they can't eat properly, they balanced diets. NHS then is a strain on that because they get ill at a younger age and various things. And again, we pay for it all the way along rather than just looking at this and thinking, right, where do we need to focus on? Yes, it's not going to affect me. It's time's gone for me and for all of us in this room. But for future generations, you have to look at preschool age and what you're going to do with these children, because this is your country's future. These are your future employees, future entrepreneurs, potentially, future scientists, whatever you want them to be. You have to look at preschool. It's vitally important.
Unfortunately, there's future waste of talent.
Exactly.
That's the biggest crime.
Absolutely.
Future waste of talent.
Yeah,
All those
absolutely.
kids will get through.
Yeah. No, without doubt. But thanks for listening to me, guys.
Thank you. Ask Julie to give a short vote of thanks. Thank you.
What a marvellous history Wood Street has, and what amazing work you do. As a teacher who spent most of my teaching career in the inner city, I can identify with everything that you've said today. No, there's nothing that I would disagree with you on. So, really, really interesting talk.
Thank you.
And I think we need to thank Des in the normal way. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're about to have some food, and we'll have Grace in a moment. If anyone wants to come and talk to Des, then we can do a bit of musical chairs. Come and sit here and have conversation, ask questions. And if anyone wants to see the Wood Street mission after the meeting's finished, then Des says it's okay for us to go along today and have a look. So thank you, Des.
You're welcome.
Okay, should we ask?
You're cracking with the announcement, boss.
The only announcement I really want to go with is next. Well, yes. Are there pressing announcements?
Make these, that's 13th of April is the AGM, so that's fortnight, and it's by Zoom at a slightly later time Normal at 7 p.m. 1900 hours. And then we're back here on the 20th of May.
Thank you. Any other pressing announcements? Okay, on the next fellowship is on the 4th of May, which is our community and charter evening. So notices will come around about that shortly. Okay.
Mr. President, can I just mention, bring the greetings of the Stratford and Avon Club from Monday this week. My wife and I were at Stratford and we met at the hotel we were staying. Our youngest, our son, is a professional actor, performing with Royal Shakespeare Company in Julius Caesar at Stratford and Avon. But to see him this week, but it was fortuitous that the Rotary Club next in the same venue where we stay. So I bring the greetings of President Dudley and the members of Stratford.
Thank you.
So where else?